The city was glowing with neon lights, skyscrapers touching the clouds and people rushing past in their expensive coats, holding coffee cups and leather bags. But at the corner of Fifth Avenue, a boy sat shivering on the cold pavement. His clothes were torn, his hair messy, and his hands trembling from the winter chill. His name was Ethan, and he hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days. Beside him lay a cardboard sign crudely written, "Hungry. Will work for food." Most people passed him without a glance. Some looked at him with pity, others with disgust. To them, he was just another invisible shadow in a city of millions. But Ethan had something inside him that no one knew, a gift he had carried since childhood. His late mother had been a pianist, and she had taught him everything before fate tore their family apart. Even though he hadn't touched a piano in months, the music still lived inside his fingers, waiting for a chance to break free. That night, fate gave him that chance. Inside the city's most luxurious hotel, a grand corporate dinner was taking place. The chandelier sparkled like diamonds, violins played softly, and the room was filled with powerful businessmen and women. Among them was Mr. Donovan Blake, one of the richest and most feared CEOs in the country. Known for his arrogance, he enjoyed belittling anyone he considered beneath him. Ethan wandered into the lobby, drawn by the faint sound of a piano being wheeled onto the stage in the banquet hall. His stomach growled as the smell of roasted turkey and chocolate desserts drifted toward him. A guard moved to throw him out, but before he could, Ethan stepped forward, voice weak but steady. "Please, can I play that piano?" "I'll play for food." The room went silent. The guests turned their heads. A homeless boy in rags daring to step into their world. Murmurs of laughter rippled across the tables. And then Mr. Donovan Blake himself smirked, raising his glass of wine. "You? Play the piano?" He sneered. "What's next, boy? Claiming you can outsmart Mozart?" The crowd chuckled, some shaking their heads in amusement. Ethan's cheeks burned, but he didn't back down. His hunger was stronger than his fear. "Yes, sir," Ethan whispered, his eyes glinting with quiet determination. "Just one chance. If I fail, I'll leave without a word. But if I play well, all I ask is for some food." Donovan leaned back in his chair, clearly entertained. "Fine," he said, waving dramatically. "Play. Let's give the beggar boy his stage." The hall filled with cruel laughter, but Ethan walked slowly toward the grand piano. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from hunger and cold. He sat down, took a deep breath, and gently touched the keys. The first note rang out. Then another. And suddenly the laughter stopped. The boy's thin fingers danced across the piano, weaving a melody so haunting, so powerful, that the entire room fell into stunned silence. It wasn't just music. It was pain, hope, and beauty all tangled into one. For the first time in years, Donovan Blake had nothing to say. His arrogant smirk faded, replaced by something he hadn't felt in decades: awe. And in that frozen moment, Ethan proved that sometimes greatness hides in the most unexpected places. The room remained silent. The clinking of glasses, the chatter of executives, the rustling of expensive suits, all of it had vanished, drowned by the sound pouring from Ethan's fragile fingers. He closed his eyes as he played. For Ethan, the piano wasn't just an instrument. It was his mother's voice, his childhood, his only remaining connection to the family he had lost. Each note was a memory of his mother smiling as she guided his small hands over the keys, of the nights when music was the only thing keeping them warm. The melody grew louder, more powerful. The executives, who were used to expensive performances and staged perfection, now felt something raw and real. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others leaned forward, captivated. A few even had tears forming in their eyes, though they would never admit it. When the last note finally echoed into silence, Ethan lifted his hands from the keys. His heart raced. For a moment he feared laughter would erupt again, that Donovan Blake would mock him even harder. Instead, there was only silence. Then unexpectedly, someone began to clap. Slowly, nervously. Then another joined, and another. Within seconds, the hall was filled with thunderous applause. Guests stood from their chairs, some even whistling and cheering. But Donovan Blake did not clap. He sat frozen, staring at the boy as if he had just witnessed a ghost. His eyes narrowed, though for the first time they did not carry arrogance. They carried something else: recognition. He leaned forward, speaking in a low, sharp tone that cut through the applause. "Where did you learn to play like that, boy?" Ethan stood up from the piano bench, clutching the edge as his legs wobbled. His voice cracked. My mother taught me before she passed away. A murmur spread across the hall. Donovan's eyes darkened. He slowly set down his glass of wine, his mind racing with thoughts no one else could read. Your mother, Donovan pressed. What was her name? Ethan hesitated. His instinct screamed at him to stay quiet, but something in Donovan's stare pulled the truth out of him. Clara Hayes. The wine glass in Donovan's hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Gasps erupted around the table, but Donovan didn't notice. His face turned pale. Clara Hayes. A name he hadn't heard in decades. A name tied to a past he thought he had buried forever. Ethan looked at him with innocent confusion. Sir, do you know her? Donovan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He pushed his chair back abruptly and stood, his sudden movement startling the guests. That will be all, he muttered, his voice tight. The boy has had his fun. Feed him and get him out of here. The applause died instantly. The tension in the room was sharp enough to cut. Donovan adjusted his suit jacket, trying to compose himself, but his hands were trembling. Meanwhile, Ethan stood there, his stomach twisting with both hunger and questions. Why did the CEO react that way? Why did his mother's name affect him so deeply? A waiter hurried to bring Ethan a plate of food, warm bread, soup, and roasted chicken. He devoured it gratefully, but his eyes never left Donovan, who had stepped aside to whisper urgently with one of his assistants. For the rest of the night, Donovan barely touched his meal. His usual arrogance had been replaced by silence, his gaze locked on the boy who played like a ghost from his past. And though Ethan didn't know it yet, that one performance and that one desperate plea for food had just changed his life forever. Because Donovan Blake was hiding a secret connected not only to Ethan's music, but to Ethan himself. Donovan Blake hardly slept that night. The grand charity gala, the applause, the praise, none of it mattered anymore. All he could see was the face of that boy at the piano, the way his small hands danced over the keys, the way he had said her name, Clara Hayes. Donovan poured himself another glass of whiskey in his penthouse suite, his tie loosened and jacket discarded. His assistant Martin lingered nearby, clearly uneasy. Sir, Martin began carefully, do you want me to run a background check on the boy? He seems unusual. Donovan's jaw tightened. He had spent his entire life building walls, burying mistakes and keeping his empire untouchable. But now one child's performance had shaken him to his core. No, Donovan muttered, though his voice betrayed hesitation. Not yet. If what I suspect is true. He trailed off, gripping the glass so tightly it threatened to shatter. The next morning, Ethan woke in a small shelter bed, the first full stomach he'd had in days, still giving him strength. But his mind was restless. He couldn't stop replaying Donovan Ayas' reaction when he had spoken his mother Ayas' name. He clutched a tattered locket he always carried. Inside was a faded picture of Clara smiling at the piano. Ethan whispered, Mom, who was he? Why did he look at me like that? That same morning, a black car pulled up outside the shelter. Two men in suits entered, asking for Ethan. The shelter staff hesitated, protective of the boy, but the men insisted. They carried an envelope embossed with Donovan Blake's crest. Inside, a formal invitation. Mr. Blake requests your presence at his private estate for dinner. Transportation will be provided. Signed, Martin Hayes, Chief of Staff. Ethan's heart pounded. Why would the richest man in the city want to see him again? That evening, Ethan arrived at the Blake estate. The gates were massive, the mansion glowing like a palace under the evening sky. He had never seen such wealth up close, and it made his patched clothes feel even smaller. Donovan was waiting in the grand dining hall, dressed impeccably but looking older somehow. As Ethan was escorted in, Donovan dismissed the servants with a wave. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Finally, Donovan broke the silence. You play the piano like her. Ethan blinked. Like who? Donovan's lips pressed into a thin line. Clara Hayes. The boy's eyes widened. You do know my mother. Donovan looked away, his voice low. More than you realize. Ethan clutched his locket tighter. Then tell me. Please, I deserve to know. Donovan inhaled sharply, pacing the length of the room. Clara was everything I wasn't. She was kind, selfless, talented. We met years ago, long before I built this empire. I was young, reckless. She believed in me when no one else did. His voice cracked slightly, though he tried to hide it. But I chose ambition. I left her behind. When I last saw her, she was expecting. The words hit Ethan like a thunderclap. His throat went dry. Expecting me? Donovan turned, his eyes meeting the boys. For the first time, the mask of the powerful CEO slipped and guilt poured through. Yes, Donovan whispered. Ethan, I'm your father. The room spun. Ethan staggered back, his chest tightening. For years, he had begged the universe for answers about his father, and now the truth stood before him. A billionaire who had abandoned his mother. Tears burned in his eyes, but anger quickly replaced them. You left us. You left her! She died struggling while you sat in mansions and drank wine. Donovan reached out, but Ethan recoiled. The boy's voice trembled, but his words cut like knives. You don't get to call yourself my father. You don't deserve it. Donovan flinched as though struck. For once in his life, he had no reply. What Ethan didn't know was that someone else had overheard the revelation. Martin, Donovan's loyal assistant, stood just outside the door, his expression unreadable. And with that overheard truth, a storm was about to break, one that could destroy Donovan's empire and change Ethan's life forever. Ethan stormed out of the dining hall, his small frame trembling with rage. Donovan followed, his polished shoes echoing on the marble floors. Ethan, wait! Donovan called, but the boy didn't slow down. You don't get to say my name like that, Ethan snapped, spinning around. His eyes blazed with a fire far too old for his years. Where were you when we had nothing? When Mom got sick? Do you know what it's like to beg for food? Donovan's chest tightened. For decades, he had silenced his guilt with money and power. But now, in the raw pain of this boy, the truth screamed back at him. I was a coward, Donovan admitted, his voice low. I thought success would erase the past. I was wrong. Ethan shook his head. You don't even know me. I survived without you, and I don't need you now. From the shadows of the corridor, Martin Hayes listened, his jaw tight. He had served Donovan faithfully for years, but this? A hidden child, the son of Clara, the woman Martin had loved in silence. His loyalty wavered, replaced by a dangerous thought. If Ethan was Donovan's weakness, he could also be Martin's weapon. The next day, Donovan canceled all his meetings. He instructed his driver to take him to the shelter where Ethan had been staying. But when he arrived, Ethan wasn't there. He left this morning, one of the staff members explained. Said he didn't want to be anyone's charity case. Donovan's heart sank. He had spent years crushing competitors, controlling entire markets. Yet he was powerless against the judgment of a boy who had every right to hate him. Back at his estate, Donovan pored over Clara's old letters he had secretly kept in a locked drawer. Her handwriting was soft, filled with warmth and hope. In one, she wrote, If our child ever feels alone, I pray someone will show him the music inside him. It's the only way he'll know I'm still with him. Donovan closed his eyes, realizing how much he had failed her. Meanwhile, Ethan sat on the steps of a crumbling church downtown, his locket clutched tightly in his hand. Anger wrestled with curiosity in his chest. A part of him wanted to run far away, but another part, the part that had seen Donovan's eyes, when he said Clara's name, whispered that maybe the truth was more complicated. As he sat there, a sleek black car pulled up. The window rolled down and Martin leaned out, his face calm, almost kind. Ethan, he said smoothly, I know what you're going through. Donovan isn't an easy man to trust. But I knew your mother too. Clara was special to me. Ethan looked up sharply. You knew my mom? Martin nodded. Better than Donovan ever did. He abandoned her. But I cared. His tone was gentle, but his words dripped with venom toward his employer. You don't owe him anything. If you want the truth about your mother, I can give it to you. Come with me. Ethan hesitated. Something in Martin's eyes unsettled him. But the longing for answers tugged stronger. Against his better judgment, he climbed into the car. Hours later, Donovan received a call that froze his blood. Sir, his security chief reported. The boy was last seen leaving with Martin. Donovan's glass shattered in his hand. Martin? Yes, sir. He took him. Rage and fear surged through Donovan like fire. He had lost Clara once. He would not lose Ethan too. Inside Martin's penthouse, Ethan sat across from the man, confused and wary. Martin poured him a glass of juice, speaking in low, measured tones. Martin placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, possessive like a vulture claiming prey. He's fine. Better than fine. He's finally learning the truth about you. Donovan took a step forward, his voice low but steady. Martin, this isn't about me. Or you, this is about him. No, Martin snapped, his composure cracking. This is about her. Clara deserved better than you. And if I can't have her memory, I'll take her son. I'll raise him the way she would have wanted, not in your shadow of greed and betrayal. Ethan's throat tightened. You both keep talking about Mom, but neither of you were there when she needed you. She was alone. The word struck Donovan like a blade. His chest heaved, but he forced himself to face Ethan fully. You're right, Donovan admitted, his voice rough. I failed her. I wasn't there when she needed me most. But not because I didn't care. Martin scoffed. Lies. That's all he has. Donovan ignored him, his eyes locked on Ethan. The night Clara was in the hospital, I was in jail. Ethan's eyes widened. Jail? I was a reckless man then, Donovan confessed. I'd gotten into fights, bad deals. I wanted to prove myself, but I was stupid. I was arrested, locked away, and by the time I was released, Clara was gone. She never knew the truth. She thought I abandoned her, and I've carried that shame every day since. Ethan's heart pounded. The photo Martin had shown him, he never came. Could it be that his mother had never known why? Martin sneered, his grip tightening on Ethan's shoulder. Don't believe him. He's manipulating you, just like he manipulates everyone. Look at his empire, his wealth, all built on lies. Donovan took another step closer, his voice breaking. Ethan, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve that. But I need you to know, I never stopped loving her. And when I heard you play, it was like she was alive again. You are the best part of her. And I swear to you, I will never abandon you the way I abandoned her. The warehouse was silent except for the creak of the wind. Ethan's chest rose and fell, his mind spinning. Martin leaned down, whispering fiercely in his ear. He's weak. Don't let him fool you. Come with me and I'll give you power, safety, everything he never gave your mother. Ethan's hands trembled. For so long he had dreamed of answers. Now he had two, one poisoned by hate, the other stained by regret. He looked at Martin, then at Donovan. His voice shook. I just wanted a father, he whispered. Donovan's breath caught. Tears filled his eyes. And I just wanted a second chance. Ethan tore himself from Martin's grasp and ran toward Donovan. The billionaire dropped to his knees, arms opening, and for the first time, father and son embraced. Martin's face twisted in fury. His voice echoed in the empty warehouse. You'll regret this, Ethan. You'll regret choosing him. Inside, Martin stood with Ethan at his side. The boy's face was pale, his locket clutched tightly in his hand. He looked small against the cavernous shadows of the warehouse, caught between two worlds. Donovan's footsteps echoed as he entered. Martin. Martin smiled, though his eyes glittered with venom. Ah, the great Donovan Blake. Alone as instructed. I see you still follow orders when it suits you. Donovan's jaw clenched. His gaze shifted to Ethan. Are you all right? Ethan nodded slightly, though his eyes darted nervously between the two men. But Ethan clung tighter to Donovan, whispering into his chest, I already regret not knowing you sooner. For the first time in years, Donovan felt something he thought he had lost. Hope. Holding Ethan in his arms, he whispered, I promise I'll never let go again. But hope was fragile and Martin wasn't finished. The following morning, headlines exploded across every major news outlet. Donovan Blake exposed. Billionaire's hidden past revealed. Articles detailed Donovan's arrest years ago, the scandal he had buried with money and influence. But that wasn't the worst of it. Leaked documents accused him of fraud, corruption, and secret offshore accounts. It was a media firestorm. Stock prices for Blake Industries plummeted. Board members demanded answers. Investors threatened to pull out. And at the center of it all was Martin. He appeared on talk shows, calm and persuasive, presenting himself as a whistleblower who had finally decided to reveal the truth about his corrupt employer. Donovan watched the chaos unfold on his television, his jaw tight. Ethan sat beside him, pale with guilt. This is my fault, Ethan whispered. He's doing this because of me. Donovan shook his head, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. No, son, this isn't on you. Martin's hatred for me has been festering for years. You were just the spark. At Blake Industries headquarters, chaos reigned. Executives scrambled, employees whispered, and cameras swarmed outside the glass tower. Donovan entered through the back, his presence sending ripples of unease. Inside the boardroom, his directors waited, faces grim. One of them, a sharp-faced woman named Evelyn Shaw, spoke first. "Donovan, the company is collapsing. Investors are demanding your resignation. Unless you step aside, we may not survive this." Donovan's voice was steel. "If I step aside, Martin wins. He doesn't care about this company. He only wants revenge, and I won't let him destroy what Clara believed I could build." The directors exchanged uneasy glances. Evelyn leaned forward. "Then what's your plan? Because right now you're standing on quicksand." Donovan didn't answer immediately. His eyes shifted to Ethan, who had quietly followed him into the room. "My plan," Donovan said at last, "is to fight. Not with money. Not with power, but with the truth." That evening, Donovan and Ethan sat together in his private study. Ethan fidgeted nervously, staring at the fire crackling in the fireplace. "Dad," Ethan said softly, still getting used to the word. "What if he's right? What if people only see you as the man who left Mom, as the man who built his empire on lies?" Donovan sighed, his shoulders heavy. "Then I'll show them who I really am. Not the man I was, but the man I'm trying to be now. For you." Ethan looked down at his locket, then back at his father. "Mom used to tell me, music is truth without words. Maybe you need to tell your truth with words." Donovan's lips curved into a faint smile. "Out of the mouths of children." Across the city, Martin watched the news reports from his penthouse, satisfied. But his satisfaction was short-lived when his assistant burst into the room. "Sir, Donovan just announced a press conference. He's going live tomorrow." Martin's face darkened. "He thinks he can out-talk me? No, if the truth doesn't bury him, then I will. He has weaknesses, and now so does his son." He glanced at a photo on his desk. Ethan playing piano at the gala. Martin's smile returned, cold and dangerous. "If Donovan won't lose his empire," he murmured, "he'll lose the boy." The next day, the world tuned in as Donovan Blake stepped up to a podium. The cameras clicked, the reporters shouted, but he raised a hand for silence. Ethan stood just behind him, a steady presence. "For years," Donovan began, his voice strong but raw, "I've lived in shadows. I made mistakes. I let down the woman I loved. And because of that, my son grew up without me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Donovan continued, "But this boy," he said, gesturing to Ethan, "has reminded me of something more important than money or power. Redemption. Clara Hayes believed in me when no one else did. And though I failed her, I won't fail him, not again." The cameras zoomed in as Donovan's eyes glistened with emotion. Ethan squeezed his hand, whispering, "You're doing it, Dad." But somewhere in the crowd, a pair of eyes burned with fury. Martin watched from the shadows, plotting his next move. And this time, he wasn't coming for Donovan's empire. He was coming for Ethan. The press conference ended with a thunder of applause. But Donovan knew better than to believe it was over. He had made himself vulnerable, and in doing so, given Martin exactly what he wanted. That night, the city slept under glittering lights, but Donovan couldn't. He sat awake in the study, watching Ethan doze off on the couch with a blanket around his shoulders. For the first time in years, Donovan felt like a father, not a businessman. But just as he leaned back, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Nice speech today, Donovan. Shame if your boy didn't live long enough to hear the world forgive you." Donovan's blood ran cold. He bolted upright, scanning the message again. His hands shook as he dialed his security chief. "Lock the gates. Double the guards. No one gets near the house without clearance." "Understood, sir," came the reply. But deep down, Donovan knew Martin was always one step ahead. The next day, Donovan decided to keep Ethan close. "You're not leaving my side," he told the boy as they drove toward the company headquarters. Ethan frowned. "Dad, you can't live your life in fear. Mom wouldn't have wanted that. And I don't want it either." Donovan's voice hardened. "This isn't about fear. It's about keeping you alive." But as they entered the underground parking lot, Donovan's worst fears materialized. Tires screeched. Black vans blocked their exit. Masked men in suits rushed toward the car. "Get down!" Donovan roared, pushing Ethan to the floor as bullets shattered the windshield. His security detail returned fire, chaos exploding around them. Alarms blared, lights flickered. Donovan dragged Ethan from the passenger side, shielding him with his own body as they ducked behind a concrete pillar. "Dad!" Ethan gasped, eyes wide with terror. Donovan grabbed his face, forcing him to focus. "Listen to me, Ethan. No matter what happens, you run. You hear me? You run and don't look back." But Ethan shook his head furiously, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Not without you?" Meanwhile, at a safe distance, Martin sat inside one of the black vans, watching the scene unfold on a monitor. His smile was cruel, his voice calm. "Bring me the boy," he instructed. "Leave Donovan alive. For now." The mercenaries moved in, cornering father and son. Donovan fought like a man possessed, fists, elbows, anything he could use to hold them off. But there were too many. A gun pressed against his temple, forcing him to still. Two men wrenched Ethan from his grasp. The boy screamed, reaching for Donovan, but the mercenaries dragged him toward the van. "No!" Donovan bellowed, struggling with all his strength. But the muzzle of the gun dug deeper into his skull. "Easy, Blake," one of the men hissed. "He'll be fine if you cooperate." And then just like that, Ethan was gone. The van door slammed, the engine roared, and the convoy disappeared into the night. Donovan collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, the sound of his son's cries echoing in his ears. Hours later, Donovan stood alone in his study, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. His empire was under siege. His reputation was in ruins, and now Martin had taken the one thing he couldn't afford to lose. Ethan. A single sheet of paper lay on his desk. Delivered to his home minutes ago. Scrawled across it were just 5 words. "Trade your empire for him." Donovan's fists clenched. His empire meant nothing without his son. But giving in meant Martin would win everything. He whispered to the empty room, voice trembling with rage and grief. "You want a war, Martin? You've got one." Across the city, Ethan sat in a dimly lit warehouse bound to a chair. Martin circled him slowly, his footsteps echoing. "You know," Martin said softly, crouching so his face was level with the boy's, "you look just like your mother. I wonder, did she ever tell you the truth about your father? The kind of man he really is?" Ethan glared through his tears, his voice steady despite the fear. "He's my dad, and he came back for me. That's more than you'll ever be." Martin's smile faltered, but only for a moment. He stood, his eyes cold. "Bravery runs in the family. Shame it won't save you." Donovan didn't sleep that night. Every minute Ethan was in Martin's hands felt like another knife twisting in his chest. He paced the study, his empire's future files scattered across the desk, but none of it mattered. At 3 a.m., his phone buzzed again. "Unknown number. You have 48 hours. Transfer control of Blake Enterprises to me, or the boy disappears forever." Attached was a photo of Ethan, bruised but alive, sitting in that dark warehouse. Donovan slammed his fist against the desk, the wood splintering. "Not again," he growled. "I already lost Anna. I won't lose him too." The next morning, Donovan assembled his most trusted inner circle. Not his board, not his executives. Men and women who had been with him since the early days. People he knew would die before betraying him. "Martin thinks he's untouchable," Donovan said, voice rough. "He thinks I'll just roll over and hand him my life's work. But he doesn't understand something. I built this empire from nothing, and I'll burn it all to the ground before I let him take my son." One of the older men leaned forward. "Do you have a plan, sir?" Donovan's eyes narrowed. "I don't negotiate with snakes. We are going to get Ethan back, and then we end Martin once and for all." Meanwhile, inside the warehouse, Ethan sat tied to a chair, his wrists raw from the rope. Martin's men came and went, feeding him scraps, shoving him around when he resisted. Martin himself visited often, whispering poison into the boy's ear. "Your father isn't coming," Martin taunted one evening, crouching low. "He'll choose his empire over you, just like he chose it over your mother." Ethan, bruised but unbroken, spat at Martin's shoes. "You don't know my dad. He's stronger than you'll ever be." For the first time, Martin's mask cracked. He backhanded the boy hard enough to split his lip. "You'll see," Martin hissed. "You'll see just how weak he really is." But Ethan's words had already struck something inside him. Martin hated Donovan, hated that despite all his money and power, he still had something Martin could never touch: loyalty. Back at the Blake estate, Donovan prepared for war. He mapped every known warehouse Martin had used, every shell company, every offshore account. He had surveillance teams combing the city, drones scanning rooftops, his private security doubled. But Martin was careful. Too careful. Finally, Donovan turned to the one person he hadn't asked for help in years, his brother-in-law, James. A man he hadn't spoken to since Anna's funeral. James arrived reluctantly, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Why should I help you, Donovan? You drove Anna into an early grave, and now Ethan's paying the price for your sins." Donovan swallowed hard. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't live with that guilt every single day? But right now, he's all I have left of her. Please, James, if not for me, for Ethan." James studied him for a long, tense silence. Then, with a heavy sigh, he muttered, "Martin's been using the docks. Pier 17. He's moving weapons through there. If Ethan's alive, that's where he'll be." Donovan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Then that's where I'll end this." That night, the rain came down in sheets, lightning splitting the sky as Donovan's convoy approached the docks. Armed men moved like shadows across the pier, guarding the warehouse. Donovan stepped out, soaked to the bone but unshaken. His team fell into formation behind him. Inside, Ethan sat shivering, listening to the storm outside. He prayed under his breath, not for himself but for his dad to come, and as thunder rattled the walls, he heard it, gunfire in the distance. The rescue had begun. Donovan moved through the chaos like a man possessed. His team engaged Martin's guards in a storm of bullets and shouts. Donovan himself fought with brutal precision, taking down anyone who stood in his path. At last, he burst into the warehouse. "Ethan!" he roared. The boy's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Dad!" Donovan sprinted forward, cutting through two guards before collapsing to his knees at his son's side, tearing the ropes loose. He pulled Ethan into his arms, holding him like he would never let go again. But then, a slow clap echoed across the room. Martin stepped out from the shadows, unarmed, smiling. "Well done, Donovan," he said coolly. "But tell me this. How many of your men are dead outside just so you could play hero?" Donovan rose slowly, shielding Ethan behind him. His fists clenched. "This ends tonight, Martin." Martin smirked. "Oh, I agree." The warehouse shook with the thunder outside, rain hammering against broken windows. Donovan stood tall, his body shielding Ethan as Martin circled like a predator. "You've built your empire on fear," Martin sneered. "And yet here you are, shaking. Tell me, Donovan, what will you sacrifice to keep him?" Donovan's jaw tightened. "Anything, everything." Martin chuckled darkly, reaching inside his coat. For a moment, Ethan thought he was pulling a gun, but instead Martin revealed a small detonator. "One push," he hissed, "and this place comes down. You, me, the boy, gone. You don't get to win." Ethan's pulse thundered. "Dad." Donovan never broke eye contact with Martin. His voice was steady, almost too calm. "You won't do it. You've hated me too long, Martin. You want to see me suffer. Killing us both would rob you of that satisfaction." Martin's smile faltered. "You're bluffing," Donovan pressed, stepping closer. "Because deep down you don't want justice for Clara. You don't want Ethan, you just want to be me." "But you never will." Martin's hand trembled slightly on the detonator. That was all Donovan needed. In one swift motion, he lunged, knocking Martin's arm aside. The detonator clattered across the floor. They crashed into a brutal fistfight, years of hatred exploding in every blow. Martin fought with desperation, wild and vicious. Donovan fought with something stronger, the burning will to protect his son. At last, Donovan slammed Martin against a steel beam. His hand clamped around his throat. "This is over," he growled. Martin gasped, eyes bulging with rage. "She should have chosen me. She should have..." Donovan cut him off with one final punch that dropped Martin to the ground unconscious. The warehouse went silent except for Donovan's ragged breathing. Ethan ran forward, clinging to his father's waist. "Dad, you came." Donovan's throat tightened. He cupped his son's face, brushing away dirt and blood. "Of course I did. You're my son. Nothing, not Martin, not my empire, not my mistakes, will ever change that." Ethan's lip trembled. For the first time, he let the word slip out. "Dad." By dawn, Martin was in custody, his empire of lies dismantled piece by piece. The authorities swarmed the docks, hauling away weapons and files that tied him to years of betrayal. Donovan and Ethan, though battered, stood side by side watching it all. One officer approached. "Mr. Blake, you'll be needed for questioning. There's a lot to sort out." Donovan nodded, then looked at Ethan. "But not today. Today I take my son home." Back at the Blake estate, sunlight finally pierced through storm clouds. Donovan led Ethan into the music room. the one place he had never changed since Anna's death. The grand piano sat waiting, silent and polished. Ethan hesitated, then placed his hands on the keys. He played softly, halting at first, then stronger. The same melody his mother once played. Donovan sat beside him, his large hands trembling as he pressed a key. For years he had avoided this piano, too broken to face it. But now with Ethan, the music didn't feel like pain, it felt like healing. When the last note faded, Donovan whispered, "She would have been proud of you." Ethan looked up, eyes wet but shining. "I think she'd be proud of you too, Dad." For the first time in decades, Donovan let his tears fall, not of regret, but of relief. He pulled Ethan into his arms, holding him as if he would never let go. Outside, the storm had passed. Inside, father and son had finally found what they both had been searching for: each other. End of story. This finale ties everything: Donovan's redemption, Ethan's acceptance, Martin's downfall, and the emotional healing of father and son.